Welcome into a fresh new hour of CBS Sports HQ. I'm Jordan Giorgio alongside Jacqueline D'Agostino. We have Douzable, Pete Prisco in the house. A full set here, and we appreciate you two joining us on this Monday morning before you jet on over to New Orleans. You looking forward to Super Bowl week or what, man?
Yeah,
so many
Super Bowl week's always fun.
Yeah,
and in New Orleans, it's a great spot for the Super Bowl.
Great city. Very jealous, very jealous. We'll be living vicariously through you guys. Well, we have breaking news right off the top of the show here. Out of the NFL, where star pass rusher Myles Garrett has requested a trade from the Cleveland Browns. He released a statement saying he is making the request because his ultimate career goal is to win a Super Bowl. Garrett is the reigning defensive player of the year and a four-time All-Pro. He also recorded double-digit sacks in every season except his own rookie years. Big news, right?
Big news, and our NFL insider Jonathan Jones reporting that they're saying, the Browns are saying, we are not entertaining any offers for him as of right now. They're very quick to say that. But again, Jordan, to your point, big breaking news coming down just before the show. So before we get into it, Pete, I'll start with you. Just interested to hear your initial thoughts when you're hearing that Myles Garrett wants out of Cleveland.
By the way, the Mavericks were saying they were not listening to the offers on Luka either. And
Everybody's tradable.
Everybody's tradable. Everybody. If you really want to trade somebody, you could trade him. This would be a tough decision to make, in large part because he is such a great player, A, but B, the cap numbers. They have no cap room. You know, the Deshaun Watson contract just prohibits them in a lot of ways from building this roster out and from making a deal like that. Now, you could do it, but you have to get really creative and play cap gymnastics, but you could do it. But why would you? Because he's not happy? No, you're not getting rid of a guy who's the foundational piece of your defense. I wouldn't do it. I don't think ultimately they will do it. And somebody mentioned 2 number ones. Nobody's giving up 2 number ones for Myles Garrett and paying him. That's not happening. Now, a 1 and a 3, maybe, but not 2 number ones.
Okay. He's not only the foundational piece of their defense, he's the face of the franchise when you look at Myles Garrett and what he's been able to do. You see the numbers right there, and people will say it was a quote-unquote down year for him. Well, Pete, he was still number 2 in sacks in the NFL for a team that had an offense that never stayed on the field. So for you to get 14 sacks when you're not getting any help for the offense kind of shows how special you are. I'm like Pete, I don't think the Cleveland Browns will trade him, 1, because it's going to be essentially almost impossible cap room wise, but 2, you don't trade away foundational pieces and faces of the franchise. If you do that, other guys that are free agents, they're not going to want to come to your team. Now, again, I know that Myles Garrett is frustrated because he's one of the top players in the league, and he wants to go to a Super Bowl. And right now, we don't know what direction they're going at the quarterback position.
I mean, think about that. You give Deshaun Watson that crazy contract. You restructure that crazy contract to keep him around, and then you trade away your best player. What does that say about your organization? It tells you if that's the case, it wouldn't be very well. Well, it's not very well run anyways because they made the decision to get Deshaun Watson.
Now, it sounds like it's very wishful thinking that this does come to fruition. But if we kind of look into the future, and if it does happen, they get creative, as you mentioned, work around some financials, and it does happen. What makes sense, Pete, as a potential landing spot for Myles Garrett?
Any team that needs an edge rusher. I mean, the Commanders.
I was about to say your Commanders for sure.
Would make a lot of sense, and they have money and they have room. So they're one of those teams that could do it. The New England Patriots have money and room and need. So those are 2 teams right off the top. Excuse me, right off the top of the bat, who I think would make a lot of sense for Myles Garrett.
How about the Atlanta Falcons? Now, it'll be weird cap-wise, but just imagine this, Pete. Kirk Cousins has a no-trade clause. What if he waives that as a part of this trade with Myles Garrett to go to the Atlanta Falcons? Because they need edge rushers in the worst way in Atlanta. Now, they're dealing with some gymnastics as well when it comes to the cap room. So that'll be interesting if both teams, if this actually comes to fruition, we don't believe it will. But the Atlanta Falcons in a package with Kirk Cousins with Myles Garrett to the Atlanta Falcons makes a lot of sense.
I'll give you one that I would strongly look at if I was the general manager of this team, and that would be Brandon Beane. If I'm the Buffalo Bills,
it's tough for them too, though.
It's tough because they have cap. They'd have to play the cap game as well. But if you want to, you can make it happen. I would strongly look at that. Again, I go back to everything they've done over the course of the last 5, 6, 7 years has been with an eye on getting Patrick Mahomes down in the postseason. Well, they didn't get him down in the postseason. And that was a big reason why they didn't win that game, was because their edge rushers didn't show up in that game. And so maybe you make a move like this. If you're Buffalo, you're close. You have all those, big foundational pieces to build around on the offensive side. Get one on the defensive side.
And really quickly, before we wrap this up, we're about, 5 weeks away from that trade deadline, Lige. why do you think, why now?
Free agency?
Yeah, or free agency. I'm sorry. What am I saying? Trade deadline. I'm getting
NBA, man.
NBA.
Yeah,
okay.
literally.
We'll talk about that next.
Yeah, that's coming up later in the show.
Yeah.
Sorry, but what do you think sparked this, like, today in this moment?
I think he's just frustrated.
Okay.
And this could be a trickle-down effect. I wouldn't even be surprised if a guy like Max Crosby comes out and says the same thing, because when you're a once-in-a-generational type player like Myles Garrett, right, and you continuously come to work year in and year out and you continue to lose. Now, he's actually been to the playoffs twice, and they had a win when Baker Mayfield was the quarterback. They went to the divisional round, lost to the Kansas City Chiefs. And then let's not forget, when they had 5 different quarterbacks, they went to the playoffs as well, but lost to the Houston Texans. He's clearly frustrated because he doesn't know the direction the Cleveland Browns are going in, and he doesn't want to continue to waste years while not actually going for the Lombardi Trophy. So I think this is just frustration for Myles Garrett, because he's trying to figure out, like, Pete, what are we doing in Cleveland? Like, what direction are we heading in? Because I'm wasting away my talented best years, and we're not making a move to the Super Bowl because we don't know what we're doing at the quarterback position.
Here's an idea. You could have kept Baker Mayfield. I mean, they did. There were people in that building that wanted to keep Baker Mayfield. Remember, he had a great rookie year. Then he got banged up. He had an injured shoulder, and he played through it. He shouldn't have played through it. There were people in that building who wanted to keep him, and the mandate came from above. You're going to get Deshaun Watson, and you're going to pay him. That's why this organization is where they are. It's the worst decision any franchise has made in the history of the National Football League. Terrible trade, and you paid him guaranteed money. Awful.
So it always comes back to Deshaun Watson.
Always will be. Always will be. You know, you both seem like you're on the same page here. This isn't something that's going to come to fruition. We just heard from our own Jonathan Jones that he has a source that the Browns are not taking trade requests for Myles Garrett. So just to put a bow on this, with all that kind of being said, you've been in those NFL locker rooms before. How does this affect the guys around him in that locker room?
It'll be interesting, Pete, because as a player, the one thing you can do is withhold your services. That's the only leverage you have. So it'll be interesting to see what Myles Garrett does first when the offseason program starts, and then going into training camp. If he's truly serious, this could be a holdout situation where he's like, I'm not showing up until you trade me, because that's the only leverage he currently has.
There's only so many earning years in your body.
I hear that,
and you're not going to leave $20 million because I can guarantee you, he goes outside, he's not making $20 million anywhere. So you got to look. My advice has always been to the players whenever I've talked to them over the years. Don't leave it on the table, because you're never getting that money back ever. He's not going to sit out. He might sit out some off-season work, but when push comes to shove, it's time to play, he'll show up and play.
All right, we will leave it there as we discuss the breaking news out of the Cleveland Browns organization, as Myles Garrett has requested a trade from Cleveland. You can get more on this on the Pushing the Pile podcast with our own Kyle Long and Mike Renner. All you got to do is scan that QR code on your screen and watch and listen wherever you get your podcasts.